Hi, Mrs. Brown here. I wanted to take some time and go through operant conditioning with you. Remember last time we talked about classical conditioning, which helps form associations, classical, and these are involuntary associations. So usually this is a physiological response. It's called respondent behavior, and it's really kind of automatic. Conditioning is another type of conditioning, and this is what I want to spend some time talking about within behaviorism today. So B.F. Skinner is our most famous psychologist that talked about operant conditioning, and really it's the idea of shaping behavior using reinforcements or punishments. And so people learn from the experience of either a reinforcement or a punisher if they would like to repeat the behavior or not. And so this is kind of a choice. This is not an automatic response. This is not a physiological response. And so this does contrast with classical conditioning. I have here the key difference between classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Both are associative, but operant is voluntary behavior or operant behavior. And it's associated with that outcome and determines that outcome. So you are making the choice. It is voluntary whether or not you will repeat the behavior or do the behavior in the first place or not, okay? It is purposeful body movements and decisions that are made, whereas classical conditioning, like I said, is automatic, involuntary, and it's called respondent behavior. So we have these two terms, operant behavior, which goes with operant conditioning, and respondent behavior, which goes with classical conditioning. So Edward Thorndike is the psychologist that I want to start with here for operant conditioning. He came up with this theory called the law of effect. Okay, so Thorndike's law of effect said, and this is kind of the foundation for operant conditioning, said that rewarded behavior is more likely to be repeated at an increasingly faster rate. So if someone or even an animal does something and they are rewarded for that behavior, it's more likely to be repeated. And these ideas, specifically of Thorndike, help to build the foundation for operant conditioning and help to influence B.F. Skinner. Thorndike's main experiment that we need to know is his puzzle box, and this helped him come up with this law of effect. So he created this cage with a latch door that could only be opened by pressing a lever. And so he put cats inside, and the cats figured out that when they pressed the lever, the cage opened, which is considered a reward. And so they were more likely to get in there and press the lever quicker and quicker once they had realized that it led to opening the door. This is going to influence Skinner and the Skinner box and some of the later experiments for operant conditioning. So Thorndike's law of effect is definitely something we want to know. And then we get to B.F. Skinner. So B.F. Skinner was definitely the most influential behaviorist who talked about operant conditioning and studied the effect of rewards on repeating behavior. So he came up with the idea of shaping. So this idea that we can actually train step by step using rewards, the gradual progression towards a desired behavior. So for example, if we want our children to clean their room, we can actually use shaping to help reinforce every step of the way that they get closer and closer to that desired behavior. So, they put their clothes in the laundry. Good job. You put your clothes in the laundry. They make their bed. Wow, you've made your bed. You're almost, halfway there to cleaning your room. Good job. You've done your laundry. You've made your bed. And then, they might clean up their toys. Wow, and your toys are cleaned. And you might offer, praise as a reward, or you might even offer a tangible reward. But shaping is, every single small step towards that desired behavior, you can reinforce. And that's going to help train towards that desired behavior. So we use shaping a lot with my kids when we were trying to potty train them. If they would even just tell us they had to use the bathroom, we would reward. And then, they would, go to the bathroom by themselves, we would reward. And then if they they went to the bathroom 3 times by themselves, we would reward. So we would reward every step of the way until eventually, they had a full day of using the potty by themselves, etc. So shaping is a concept that you want to know for operant conditioning. And like I mentioned with Thorndike's puzzle box, Skinner came up with the operant chamber, or the Skinner box, where he also did similar things, training rats and training animals to do certain behavior using food and using other reinforcers as well. He is some of the famous experiments that you can look up for Skinner. Pigeons playing ping pong and learning to fly these little mini airplanes. And he really thought that he could get anyone to do anything based on his idea of operant conditioning, that reinforcers are such a powerful motivator that he really could get anyone to do anything. Okay, so just a little bit more on shaping. This is from your RT&W. Like I said, a procedure in operant conditioning where reinforcers guide behavior closer and closer towards the goal. This PowerPoint's on Blackboard, so you're welcome to go watch how they trained rats to play basketball, like with these little mini balls using shaping. This is kind of a cute video, but hopefully you understand the idea of shaping. All right, this is just a model of this operant chamber, or the Skinner box. And you can, again, go to Blackboard on your own time and watch this video where they train the rats to press the lever to deliver the food from the food cup. So this is just kind of a model to show you what we're talking about by this chamber, or this Skinner box. All right, so if we can get the behavior that we desire to be repeated using reinforcers, then it's important for us to understand what types of reinforcers are out there. So anything that strengthens a behavior. So a reinforcer is something that, if it is presented, it is going to be desirable. It is going to be something that will increase the likelihood that that behavior would be repeated. So usually we're going to reinforce behaviors that are quote unquote good behaviors. Sometimes we accidentally reinforce behaviors that are bad behaviors. But usually it'd be we want to reinforce getting good grades. We want to reinforce, saying please and thank you. We want to reinforce, being kind or whatever. So any behavior that you'd like someone to do and to continue doing, you would reinforce that behavior. We have 2 types of reinforcers. We have positive reinforcers and negative reinforcers. Okay, so when you think of positive and negative, because we're also going to have positive and negative punishment. So this is positive and negative reinforcement. You always need to ask yourself, in the situation, is something being given or is something being taken away? Okay, so the first step to ask yourself to determine whether or not it's positive or negative is, if something is being given, it's positive. If something is being taken away, it's negative, okay? And then the second step to ask yourself is, do we want this behavior to be repeated, or do we want the behavior to be stopped? So if we want the behavior to be repeated, it's a reinforcer or reinforcement. If we want the behavior to be stopped, it's going to be punishment, okay? So if we want to motivate behavior, we have to use reinforcement. Operant psychologists do not believe that punishment motivates behavior. They believe that punishment stops behavior. So we're going to use reinforcement. We can use positive reinforcement, which is probably what you were originally thinking. So give something good. Give praise, give food, give a sticker, give a hug, give a high five, give money, whatever you want to give, okay? And there are lots of different types of reinforcers. If you are taking something away, it's negative, but we want the behavior to be repeated. So in this case, it is still a desirable behavior. So don't think because we're taking something away that it has to be punishment. A negative reinforcer is taking away something aversive or something bad in order to strengthen a behavior. So this isn't happening, so don't get your hopes up. But let's say I told you, if everyone in the class completes their homework, then you don't have to take the reading quiz. that would be an example of negative reinforcement. I want to reinforce the doing of the homework. I want that behavior to be repeated. Therefore, I will take away something aversive, which is in this case the quiz, and say you don't have to do this quiz because you did this good thing. Okay. So taking away something bad, if you were to tell your kids, if you eat all of your dinner, then you don't have to take out the trash. We want them to eat their dinner. We want this behavior to be repeated. We're going to remove the necessity of them to take the trash out. So if we're taking away something bad, to strengthen a behavior, that's where we get negative reinforcement. We get to punishment. So we just did reinforcement. Now we're doing punishment. We also have positive and negative punishment. The idea behind punishment is it will reduce the behavior or stop the behavior. That is the goal, is to stop the behavior, but it will definitely start by reducing the behavior, if not stopping it. And we don't want that behavior to be repeated. It is an aversive behavior or a bad behavior, so we don't want that to be repeated. So we are going to punish. We cannot motivate behavior using punishment. We have to motivate behavior using reinforcement, but we can stop behavior using punishment, okay? So again, are we giving something or are we taking it away? If we're giving something bad to reduce a behavior, it's positive punishment. This is what most people think about when they think about punishment. I'm going to give my child a spanking. I'm going to give my child, something bad. I have a friend who puts hot sauce in her kid's mouth when they're not listening. Okay, so that would be an example. And she's a great mom, by the way, so don't judge her. But that would be an example of positive punishment because she wants them to stop whatever behavior they've done, usually because it's dangerous for them. And therefore, she's giving something bad with the idea that they will associate that bad thing with that behavior and then think about not doing that behavior again because they don't want that undesirable consequence, okay? The negative punishment is negative. We're taking something away, and punishment to stop the behavior. So taking away something good, all right? You got an F in your class, therefore your parents take away your phone. They're taking your phone to stop the behavior of getting an F, okay? Or, you missed your curfew time, therefore your parents take away your right to use the car for that week, okay? So that would be an example of negative punishment. So we want to think, are we giving or taking away? Both of these will reduce the behavior though, okay? Because it's punishment. Ask yourself, all right, if I'm going to try to motivate a behavior, and this is kind of switching gears, but if I'm going to motivate a behavior and I want to use reinforcement, when should I do this? And how often should I reward for behavior? This is where we get the 4 different reinforcement schedules. All right, but before we can get into those schedules, we need to understand partial and continuous reinforcement. So continuous reinforcement is the idea that we reinforce every time something happens, okay? So it's continuous. So every time the desired behavior happens, we reinforce. This leads to quick acquisition, very fast learning, but also quick extinction of that behavior because the rewards start to kind of lose their magic, if you will. So for example, if I give my son a Skittle every time that he, wipes his nose, eventually he's going to say, you know what, whatever, I don't care about Skittles anymore. This is a really bad example, but the learning occurs quickly, but then it kind of dies out quickly as well. Partial reinforcement, on the other hand, is only reinforcing part of the time or sometimes. The acquisition is slower, so the learning of what you want them to do is slower, but it has greater resistance to extinction. So the likelihood that the learning will be more long-lasting and that they'll continue to do that behavior is greater. So we do think, depending on what our situation is, we may start with continuous and then switch to partial, but we have different pros and cons to each one. All right. I want to go through the reinforcement schedules. I'm going to do that in the second video. So go to part 2 for looking at those different reinforcement schedules.